Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. I guess today I'm doing a semi-unscripted reaction thing to the new, remix album compilation thingy from Orbital, called 30-something. Okay, so, I was initially not planning on doing a video for this, because I don't typically cover this kind of remix album thing. I too often feel like remix albums are just like supplementary material to add something else that aren't designed to stand on their own. Also, nearly always are giant mixed bags that aren't designed to be listened to from start to finish. So I typically have a rule against covering remix albums of this specific type. However, if there is any band I am willing to make an exception for, it is Orbital. I got a couple of requests to talk about it, and I thought, okay, screw it. Any excuse to talk about Orbital is a good excuse. And not to mention, I mean, Orbital are the only band I've ever been invested in enough to actively want to seek out remixes of their work. Like, there was a time in high school where I wanted to just go out of my way and listen to every remix and B-side and single and everything that this band had ever released in history because their albums just meant so much to me. I think this was pre-Wonky, so that was a little easier to pull off, even though not as much because the internet was structured a bit differently. And that did also kind of inform my mixed thoughts on remixes in general, because of course not every remix that's ever been done of Orbital is good. There are some good ones that I generally remember, like I remember liking Leo and Bushwacka's versions of Funny Break. I think there was one of Nothing Left by Schizoid Man or something like that. And there was Diversions in its entirety. Diversions is great. But like, even if I have heard the vast majority of the remixes and stuff that they had released back when I was in high school, I don't remember like anything about them from today's standards. I haven't gone back and listened to most of them in years, and I kind of just stopped keeping up with them altogether after their second breakup. But still, I mean, it's not much of an excuse to skip this anyway, especially when I also own 20 on CD, and there's not really any reason to listen to 20 nowadays, outside of the fact that it has Omen on it, and that excellent Tom Middleton remix of Halcyon. And there's also LC1 if you have the digital version. Everything else is just kind of a scattered greatest hits, and you're much better off with the albums. So yeah, I have listened to 30-something a total of once. I wrote down a bunch of notes, and I'll give my thoughts on what I think of the stuff. Because why not? Orbital discussion is fun no matter what. So yeah, 30-something, it was exactly what I thought it was going to be. It's nice. It's a fun little collection of remixes and alternate versions, and it's fun. I'm not surprised at the near complete lack of acknowledgement of any work they did after Insides. I'm maybe slightly disappointed at it. If just one person had tried to remix One Perfect Sunrise, that would have absolutely fucking made my day, but oh well. Okay, so I guess this, there's a bunch of different sections to this compilation. There's first a couple of previously unreleased cuts. There's their 30 years later self-remixes that are basically just the new versions that they play in their live concerts. And then there's all the remixes handled by everybody else. So first there's the previously unreleased material. You got Smiley, Acid Horse, and Where Is It Going featuring Stephen Hawking. I mean, we know Where Is It Going, but that version is technically not released. So yeah, I like these tracks. Smiley is not a new favorite by any stretch, but it's still a great track. I would believe it if this were built out of a demo that they had lying around from the early 90s, but at the same time, I also feel like this track was specifically crafted for this album as kind of like a mission statement for the entire thing as a whole. It's like It's like a track that it's made to take you back to the days of Orbital's origins and show their backstory and all that. Like, it's got all the old school break beats. It's got those synth organs that kind of sound like the girl with the sun in her head. It's got all those samples from the days of the underground clubs and the acid house days. I think one of the samples, citation needed on this, it's just a Pitchfork review said this, but I think one of the samples is Paul himself when he was 20, after he had just been beaten up by the cops because he was at a rave. I think this track is really neat, just as like a sort of time capsule sort of thing. Like, I could believe either this is brand new or this is really old and refurbished for this album. It's really nice. I do think it is a missed opportunity to not immediately smash cut to Where Is It Going, go Smiley Where's It Going, Acid Horse, instead of the way they did it. Because, like, the end of Smiley has a sample that says 30-something years later, and clearly what they should have done was just smash cut to the track that they played at the freaking Paralympics with Stephen Hawking. Like, I think is that the biggest crowd they ever played to? That or the 94 Live at Glastonbury thing. Yeah, that would have been really cool, as just that just show how far we have come over all these 30-something years. Instead, we get Acid Horse in the middle, which, that track's okay. That one, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that one is an old demo that they just had lying around from, like, the really early days, like, maybe pre-Chime, like, from the 80s. It sounds like a demo that they would eventually turn into their track Omen, because of the I Seen the Future samples that are through the entire thing that also show up on Omen. And you know, I'm all game for some Omen demos every now and then. I do have this lying around on my shelf. That EP is okay, by the way. And this track is okay. But, yeah, it's the kind of thing, I listened to it once, I probably don't need to hear it again. It's not really that interesting. Next, there's the 30 years later versions of their old standbys. They got the 5 tracks that they have to play at every concert: Impact, Satan, Chime, Halcyon, Belfast, and also the box as a bonus. I already knew exactly what I was getting into because, I mean, I have seen Orbital live the one time, night I got this shirt. These are just the same versions that I heard at that concert, so I already knew exactly what I was getting into here. Like, Impact 30 years later and The Earth is Still Burning is, that is a great subtitle, but the track itself has barely changed at all from, like, the USA version or the other versions that they always play live. I mean, the synths are clearer to match with their newer material, but structurally it's exactly the same. I guess you could say that is symbolism for something, but yeah. Satan 30 years later is almost completely different from the original version at this point. Like, that's way more up-tempo and rollicking and much heavier than it used to be. Well, it maybe not heavier, but heavier in a different kind of way, like in a way that could, like, transition into their track Wonky. Don't really have anything to say about the new Chime version. It's a good new Chime version. The Halcyon, the new version of Halcyon, is interesting, I guess, because I kept getting faked out by this one. There's like 3 fake endings of this, where I kept expecting this to, like, break into that Bon Jovi, Belinda Carlisle matchup that they always do in their live sets. It never did that. I guess that's something that they don't have the rights for or something. I guess that part right at the very end, though, where they, like, do all the weird synth stuttering, and that's kind of cool. Belfast 30 years later is probably the best version I've ever heard of Belfast. Now, on one hand, you can kind of take that with a grain of salt, because Belfast is not really one of my biggest favorites they've ever done. Like, I mean, it's still a fantastic track. It's still an absolute classic. But I don't know if I would even put it in, like, my top 30 that they've ever done. I think it's a tiny bit overrated. But I do really like this particular version of it. The whole second half of it goes a lot harder. That's a lot more interesting and dynamic than the original was, which kind of just had the one idea and then just stuck to it the whole way through, and the only major change up was the fact that the tempo slowed down at the end. Even take some parts I like from like the live at Glastonbury version. Like this is a really nice version of Belfast. I really like it. And then there's the box, which that's the only one I had not already seen live. I mean, it's structurally the exact same as you remember, but it is kind of cool to hear this track being completely rebuilt from the ground up for the first time, I think. Like, every single synth setting sounding slightly different, and like the mix coming together in an oddly smoother way, like the bells are more present. I think they added this one in because they have that soundtrack to the Pentaveret, which I have not listened to. You can let me know if that's worth going out of my way for. I don't know, I haven't really found the time for it. And that finally brings us to the remixes. The actual remixes. This is pretty much exactly what I expected. It is a pretty standard remix album. None of them are bad, but I wouldn't say I absolutely love any of them either. They're very hit and miss for me, I would say. Like, they do start out strong with Are We Here Dusky remix. This is cool because I think this is the first remix I've ever heard of Are We Here that takes that last third out of context without feeling like you're completely missing the point. Like, I always hated alternate versions of Are We Here that just cut straight to that part, because you miss all the build-up, and just taking the payoff by itself doesn't really work as well, because it's a bit too unpleasant and harsh to really work in the triumphant way it's supposed to. If you have all the build-up, then you have that section to compare it to, and it feels that much more refreshing when you actually get to it. This remix feels like it works because it doesn't have the harshness of the original. It's a lot smoother and cleaner sounding, so that's nice. I mean, I'm not gonna say I like absolutely love this remix, but I'll give them credit for getting the point of Are We Here. That is probably the remix I have the most to say about. So yeah, there's some good and some eh. As for the good ones, I really like Girl with the Sun in Her Head Floex remix. It's really interesting to hear all the ingredients of this track being repurposed into this much weirder and more sinister sounding like reharmonization, building a different cut out of the same pieces. That's what I like to hear in remixes. I like hearing remixes that are able to build on the original and give a new twist on the stuff you already know. Like, all the insides cuts were all my favorites. Like, I think surprisingly my favorite remix out of all of these was Joris Voorn's remix of The Box. I did not see that coming at all, but like, I love how he made a whole bunch of references to like the 28-minute single version, and like he also like just reassembled a whole bunch of different parts of The Box, but still perfectly captured the spirit of the original. Like, that was like a really creative spin on The Box, I would say, but it still totally feels like The Box. And my other big favorite was Lone's remix of The Girls with the Sun in Her Head. Lone did a good job of making it sound like his own. He combined it both with his breakbeat style and his ambient style. He kept changing things up over 8 whole minutes, and that worked really well. Kept things interesting. It combined what I like about The Girl with the Sun in Her Head with what I like about Lone. So that was a major highlight. Outside of that, I also quite liked both of the Halcyon remixes. Logic 1000's mix was cool. It's just a very standard dub techno, tech house version of Halcyon. It's good. There are a lot of very plain tech house sort of takes on the old Orbital classics in this album, but I feel like if there is any like just totally played straight tech house cut, out of all of these that I would want to come back to, it's the Halcyon one. So yeah, Logic 1000 did a good job. And of course, John Hopkins' remix was exactly what you would expect it to be. Of course, his style of bouncy beats and more heartfelt ambience works really well being worked into Halcyon, and he was clearly directly influenced by it back in the day. Neither of these versions are as good as Tom Middleton's Halcyon remix from 20, but they're both very good. John Tejada's remix of Impact, it was very solid. It had plenty of progression. Though I was hoping that he wouldn't follow the original quite as closely as he did. I kind of wish he had done a bit more to make that it follow his own style a bit more, I guess. Even if he has obviously been inspired by Orbital in the past, he does, I don't know. It's a good remix, but I was hoping for more out of it. I guess the Octave 1 remix of Chime is cool because, like, they're in a really old house outfit that started in the exact same era as Orbital, so they provided a new version of Chime which really leaned into that retro 90s aesthetic and sounded really authentic to that era, but isn't really that interesting outside of that. The Rich NXT remix of Impact is forgettable, the Eli Brown remix of Chime is forgettable, and there's also way too many remixes of Belfast. I mean, they are mostly good. I guess I wasn't really crazy about the Yotto remix. I mean, it's fine. It's a bit more amped up, but that was probably the point at which I kind of started to tune out. The Anna Techno remix of Belfast is a weird mashup with Underworld's Born Slippy, which really caught me off guard, but that's a thing. And I guess I like how the two remixes at the end, they got the David Holmes remix and the Anna Ambient remix. I don't know if I want to come back to these, like, individually, but I like how these two cuts kind of feel like they directly segued into each other, and, like, together they could form one big epic 17-minute version of Belfast that still kept me invested that whole time. I mean, these aren't the best versions of Belfast I've ever heard. The 30 Years Later remix earlier that Orbital did on their own is better than any other remix later on this album, but still, it's a nice way to close out the album. Oh yeah, and I took a shower, and while I was in the shower, I realized I skipped over the Shanti Celeste remix of Are We Here, which is interesting, but it sounds absolutely nothing like Are We Here. Like, I had to, like, actively sit up and pay attention to even pick up on what the connection to the original was. Like, it does have those iconic drum fills that, and it does have Alison Goldfrapp's voice pitched up, like, way at the end. Other than that, it's like a completely original, like a goofy track that maybe could have made John Tejada's Logic Memory Center or something. It is nice. It's neither one of my favorites, but neither one is one of my least favorites. I'll take an original take like this over something that's, like, just redundant and copies off the original without doing anything interesting with it. And yeah, I think that I've now given my thoughts on everything on 30-something. So, yeah, overall, 30-something is nice. It's maybe not the kind of thing you need to, like, go out of your way for, but if you are as much of an Orbital diehard as I am, then, I mean, you don't really have much of an excuse not to give it a shot. Even if I don't see myself, like, coming back to this and listening to it, there is still much more of a reason to come back to this over 20, and I have already purchased the CD that's probably gonna be coming in the mail in a few weeks or something. I don't know. So yeah, 30-something is good. It was nice as excuse to ramble about Orbital ad nauseum as I have. And I'm gonna leave it at that. I'm not gonna rate this thing for obvious reasons. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. Shout out to my Patreon supporters, they're awesome people. You want to add yourself to that list, link to my Patreon is in the description. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.